My name is Rachel Carter, and I still remember the taste of that Monday morning's coffee. Bitter, not because of the roast, but because of what came with it. My 3-year-old son, Max, was giggling in his booster seat, spooning scrambled eggs onto the floor as I tried to sneak in a few sips and respond to emails before another whirlwind day began. I was in my Seattle townhouse, the place I once called a symbol of our stability. That's when I saw it. The email. The subject line was clinical, as if ripped from a legal brief moving forward. I clicked it instinctively, still half in mom mode, and then everything around me slowed. Attached were two things. One was a scanned set of divorce papers. The other was a photo. My husband, Aaron, smiling smugly beside a woman I didn't recognize holding champagne flutes on the balcony of the penthouse in San Diego. The caption below, clearly added with intention, read, "Our new beginning." My stomach clenched. That penthouse had been our first major investment after Pulseline secured its Series A funding. I had paid for it outright. It was my dream, a reward after years of building a company from nothing while pregnant with Max. And now, he was in it. With her. I read the short message Aaron had typed under the image. "The condo is mine now. The deed is in my name. I've moved on with Tasha. Please do not contest this. It will only hurt Max." He ended it with his usual passive-aggressive signature. "Best Aaron." My hands trembled not from fear, but from the slow ignition of a flame in my chest. A flame I hadn't felt in years. Not since the early startup days when I was told by investors to find a male co-founder so someone would take me seriously. Aaron had always played the supportive husband on the surface. He called Pulseline my little project, said he was proud of me, but only when it got him attention at cocktail parties. He was never there when Max had colic at 2 a.m. He never stayed late when our servers crashed the week of our launch, but he was always quick to remind me the penthouse had his name too. For tax reasons, he said. And I, trusting in our marriage, agreed. I looked at Max, his hair curled at the edges like mine. His big brown eyes widened when he dropped his fork. He laughed, not knowing his world had just shifted. I forced a smile, picked up the fork, and kissed his cheek. Then I stood, slowly walked to the kitchen island, and opened my laptop. The feeling in my chest wasn't panic, it was precision. Aaron had made the first move thinking I'd crumble, but he had no idea what I'd prepared for. I replied to his email in one sentence. "Are you sure about that, Aaron? Check the documents." Then I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I took a deep breath, steadying my fingers as I dialed Erica, my attorney. I told her we had a situation one I was prepared for, and that I would forward every contract showing the funds for the condo had come directly from Pulseline accounts under my name. Aaron didn't know I had updated everything with legal protections after Max was born. He thought he was the smarter one, that I was just too focused on diapers and deadlines. He had always underestimated me. That was his first mistake. I carried Max upstairs for his nap, his arms wrapped around his stuffed dinosaur. As he drifted off, I sat in the hallway and stared at the door, letting the silence settle. The betrayal stung. Not the loss of love. That had faded months ago during Aaron's so-called business trips. What stung was the audacity, the entitlement, the fact that while I was nursing our son, he was preparing to steal from us both. I opened the financial dashboard on my phone. My heart dropped. The college fund I had set up for Max, over $300,000, was gone. Transferred to an unrecognized account just 2 days ago. I sat there on the carpet holding my phone, staring at that line item. I knew I had compartmentalized too much, trusted too easily. But that moment changed everything. The hurt began to calcify into clarity. He took from me. He took from our son. And now he would see what happened when you betrayed someone who built everything with her own hands, not for power, not for status, but for protection, for family, for something that mattered. Aaron had made his move. Now it was my turn. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the hallway carpet while Max slept in his room and began laying the groundwork for what would become a very calculated storm. I emailed Erica the scanned documents of the original deed transfer for the San Diego penthouse. Pulseline's CFO and I had structured the purchase carefully after our Series A funding, ensuring the financial paper trail pointed exclusively to me. Aaron had convinced me to add his name for tax efficiency. I had done it, yes, but only after Erica had drafted a private agreement that stated clearly I was the sole financial contributor and legal owner. Aaron never cared to read the fine print. He was always more interested in optics than substance. That would be his second mistake. I forwarded all of it. Then I pulled up Pulseline's internal monitoring dashboard. One of our best security engineers, Raymond, had quietly implemented a set of admin tools for me when I was pregnant. He knew that once our technology matured, competitors would come sniffing around. At the time, I thought it was paranoia. Now I thanked him silently. I saw it. Several access attempts from a device tied to our home network. Someone had tried and failed to enter a restricted section of our diagnostic algorithm development, the same one we had just pitched to Mayo Clinic for a groundbreaking trial. That algorithm was the heart of Pulseline's next valuation, and someone likely Aaron had been poking around. I copied the logs, encrypted them, and sent them to Raymond with a short message. "Lock this down, eyes only, and call me." My phone buzzed moments later. "Rachel." He said, his voice low but calm. "This is serious." Whoever it was knew what to look for. I said I had a good idea who. I promised I'd follow up with evidence. Then I turned to Erica again. We needed to get in front of this. Legally. Financially. Everything. I walked downstairs and called my assistant Mia, told her to clear my schedule for the week. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Done." But 30 minutes later, she called back urgency in her voice. "Rachel, you're going to want to see this." She had found Tasha's Instagram. It was full of pictures. Champagne on the penthouse balcony. Sunset yoga in the master bedroom. My master bedroom. She was wearing my mother's vintage bracelet in one post. In another, she was lounging in a silk robe I had custom-made during a supplier trip to Kyoto. Then came the caption that made my blood run cold. "Our place. Our beginning. Grateful for my love and all he's fought for." One photo dated months ago showed Tasha holding the penthouse key. I hadn't even noticed it missing from the Seattle house. I had been nursing Max. Tired, distracted, and all that time Aaron was laying bricks for a new life that didn't include me or our son. I opened Pulseline's private investor folder and reviewed our most sensitive files. Everything was intact. But I noticed Aaron's name among the list of restricted access alerts. He had tried using my login once failed. Then again, from the home network also failed. But he wasn't acting alone. Tasha had a photo tagging a biotech event in San Diego standing beside a man I recognized immediately. Ethan Ford, the CEO of VitalScope, a direct competitor to Pulseline. The same man who had once offered to acquire us and was furious when I declined. Mia sent over more screenshots from Tasha's private account, including a thread of messages between her and Aaron bragging about their plan to replicate Pulseline's tech. They didn't say it explicitly, but they didn't have to. The intent was clear. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. I was looking at premeditated corporate sabotage. My stomach twisted, but my hands were steady. I knew what I had to do. I sat at the dining table and began building my response. One document at a time. One proof at a time. One nail for the legal coffin. I created a new, secure folder labeled Guardian. Inside, I put the deed agreements, photos of Tasha in my belongings, Pulseline's access logs, Aaron's attempted breaches, even a screenshot of our joint account showing the drained college fund. Then I called Erica again. We weren't dealing with a simple divorce anymore. This was theft. This was espionage. This was war, and I would not lose. Not for me, not for Max, not for the company I had spent the last 6 years building while everyone around me assumed I was just lucky. I stared at the last image Mia had sent. Aaron in the penthouse grinning at sunset, the same sunset I used to watch with Max nestled in my lap. I whispered to no one. He took the wrong thing from the wrong woman. Now he'll learn what I've really built. And I will take it all back. That night, after Max fell asleep, curled beside his dinosaur under his navy blanket, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, but my mind was moving faster than any algorithm we had ever coded. Every detail of the last year began replaying not as isolated moments, but as a pattern. Aaron's sudden interest in my work, his dismissive tone when I tried explaining new features we were piloting, his deflection whenever I brought up Pulseline's growth or upcoming expansion. I had chalked it up to jealousy or boredom, maybe even the strain of parenting. But now I saw the truth. He had been studying me, watching, learning, not to admire or support, but to dismantle. While I nursed our son, he was downloading files. While I missed dinner meetings to rock Max back to sleep, he was having them with my enemies. He used our marriage like camouflage. I rose early and tiptoed downstairs to my office, lit only by the soft glow of my monitor. I reopened the Guardian folder and added a new section labeled Phase 2. That morning, Erica called with news. The deed transfer on the penthouse had been filed, yes, but the legal agreement I signed with Aaron superseded it. Her voice was crisp, calm, surgical. "Rachel, the condo is yours, and the records will prove it. We'll file today." Then came Raymond's update. He had traced Aaron's failed server breach attempts to a VPN exit node in California and had logs showing those attempts matched up exactly with timestamps from our home office router. There was no question now. Aaron had tried to steal the core of Pulseline's AI, the same AI we were set to unveil at the Stanford Medical Innovation Conference. I closed my eyes and let that sink in. My husband, the father of my child, was trying to destroy not just my career, but my mission. Pulseline wasn't a toy or a trophy. It was born out of necessity. I built it after my mother died from a heart condition that could have been detected earlier with real-time data. I had promised I'd make sure no one else had to suffer like that, and now Aaron and his girlfriend were plotting to sell it off to the highest bidder. I wouldn't let it happen. Erica and I spent the day compiling the case. We submitted formal requests to freeze all joint accounts and began tracing the transfers made by Aaron in the last 6 months. He'd been siphoning small amounts from Pulseline affiliate investments and stacking them into shell accounts under LLCs tied to Ethan Ford's holding company. It was sophisticated, but not smart enough. Because I had already ensured Pulseline's back-end financials were protected under a multi-layered structure Aaron didn't even know existed. When he thought he was accessing Pulseline's sensitive data, he had actually triggered a security honeypot, a fake environment built to detect espionage attempts. My engineers had built it for cybersecurity drills. It had now become real-world evidence. Mia called again, her voice sharper now. "Rachel, you're not going to believe what I found." She had accessed an older social profile of Tasha's, one I'd never seen. Buried in the friend list was a connection to none other than Ethan Ford's sister. It turned out Tasha was not just a fling or a lover. She was a calculated pawn. Her entire presence in Aaron's life had been orchestrated. Her charm, her timing, even her move to San Diego, they all lined up perfectly with the timeline of our most important development milestones at Pulseline. I sat back in my chair, breath shallow. This wasn't a messy affair. This was corporate warfare disguised as marital collapse. I stood, walked into Max's room, and watched him sleep for a moment. His little chest rose and fell with each soft breath, his fingers curled around the edge of his blanket. He deserved a life free from this kind of manipulation. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Mommy's going to fix this." Then I called Erica back. "We're not just going to fight for the penthouse. We're going to expose every single one of them. Aaron, Tasha, Ethan, we're going to show them what happens when you target the wrong mother, the wrong CEO, the wrong woman." That night, I didn't just finalize the lawsuit. I began planning the takedown. And I would do it not through rage, but through absolute precision. Piece by piece, document by document, betrayal by betrayal, until there was nothing left for them to hide behind. The next morning, Seattle was blanketed in a soft fog, but my mind was clear. I dropped Max off at preschool, kissed his cheek, and told him I loved him like I always did. He laughed and asked if he could bring his dinosaur for show and tell. I said yes. Then I drove straight to my office. Not to run Pulseline, but to protect it. Raymond had stayed late the night before. He greeted me with a nod, already pulling up more logs. We found a data packet Aaron had attempted to download from a remote desktop session, one that mimicked my credentials. It failed, but it gave us proof of intent, and Raymond had taken it further. He'd flagged a secondary breach attempt this time from the penthouse's IP address. That meant Aaron hadn't stopped. He had doubled down, probably assuming that even if I discovered the divorce betrayal, I'd be too emotional to notice what he was doing to Pulseline. But I wasn't just noticing. I was documenting. Mia entered the office holding her iPad. She had found an archived interview with Ethan Ford from 2 years ago. In it, he mentioned a new diagnostic platform his company was working on. His words were almost identical to the language I had once pitched in a closed investor meeting, a meeting Aaron had attended as my guest. The realization stung. Aaron had been feeding Ethan for years. The affair was only the latest phase. They had been setting up a long con. Build trust, gain access, wait for the right moment, then take everything. I called Erica again. We needed more than a legal counterattack. We needed a nuclear option. She agreed. Her team began drafting a comprehensive dossier. It included Aaron's access logs, the shell accounts where Max's college fund had vanished, Tasha's connections to Ethan, and the photos of her wearing my family heirlooms. But the biggest piece came from Raymond. He discovered that Aaron had cloned part of our diagnostic algorithm into a USB stick retrieved from a local data center. The metadata matched Aaron's laptop. I held the printout in my hands, pulse steady, heart cold. This was more than betrayal. This was criminal. Erica filed the paperwork to open a federal investigation into data theft and misappropriation of assets. She also filed an emergency motion to freeze Aaron's known accounts. We acted fast because we had to, and yet Aaron moved faster. Mia ran in mid-afternoon holding her phone. "Rachel, it's happening!" She turned to the screen to show me a leaked press release. Aaron Carter announced as incoming Chief Strategy Officer at VitalScope. Effective immediately. A photo of Aaron shaking hands with Ethan, smiling, smug, confident. The announcement referenced his extensive knowledge of the healthcare tech landscape and his pioneering insights into scalable diagnostic solutions. My tech, my insight, my work. I stood silent for a moment. Then I whispered, "Let them toast. Let them announce. The higher they fly, the harder the fall." Mia handed me another device. She had hacked into Tasha's archived stories. There, plain as day, was a photo of her kissing Aaron on the penthouse balcony just days after he filed for divorce. Another clip showed her scrolling Pulseline's dashboard on his laptop while he narrated features she could barely understand. That video alone would prove Aaron had knowingly shared proprietary data with someone outside the company. And it got worse. Mia found screenshots from Tasha's private chat with Ethan's assistant where she wrote, "Once Aaron's in place, he'll leak the model to us. Pulseline will crash and burn, and no one will believe she didn't know." I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. They thought they had checkmate, but they didn't realize I'd already built a counterattack. I called Erica. "It's time," I said. "Send it all." She uploaded everything into a secured digital file and drafted an email to VitalScope's board. Subject line, "Urgent ethics breach and federal violations." In the body, she laid out each step of their conspiracy. Every file, every photo, every lie. We hit send, then we waited. Not long. Within the hour, Erica's phone rang. It was a lawyer from VitalScope's board asking for a private meeting. I watched Erica's face tighten, then relax, then harden. When she hung up, she turned to me. "They're panicking. They had no idea, and they're prepared to cooperate." "Good," I said, "because they're about to lose everything they thought they'd stolen, and we're just getting started." That evening, I sat in the living room with Max curled against me, his warm head resting on my chest, unaware of the war his mother was waging in silence. I held him tighter than usual, feeling the weight of everything not as a burden, but as a vow. I would not let the world he inherited be shaped by men like Aaron or corporations like VitalScope. My phone pinged. It was Raymond. He had activated a passive monitoring system I had requested earlier in the week, and the alert came from the penthouse's IP address again. I opened the security feed from the hidden cameras I had installed years ago, a precautionary step when Aaron first suggested we keep valuables there and often traveled without me. The feed loaded. And there they were, Aaron, Tasha, Ethan Ford, standing in the living room holding wine glasses surrounded by boxes of my artwork, my furniture, my life. Ethan raised his glass. To the future of healthcare, and to the man who made it happen, Tasha added with a smirk, and to the woman too distracted playing house to notice her empire slipping away. Aaron laughed. It's all set. The board announces my position tomorrow, and by next week her diagnostic patents will be on our servers. She still thinks she's in control. He walked over to the desk and opened a laptop. I could see the screen clearly from the feed. He was logging into what he believed was PulseLine's backend. What he didn't know was that our IT team had designed it as a honeypot, a mirror site with traceable endpoints and timestamp tracking. I texted Raymond. He's in, Raymond replied. Let him dig. I want the logs airtight. Aaron clicked furiously, oblivious that every move he made was being recorded, packaged, and prepared for the federal investigation. I watched silently, letting my rage stay cold, letting the weight of what he was doing fuel my focus. Max stirred, and I whispered to him softly, It's okay, baby. Mommy's just fixing something. I muted the audio feed and opened my laptop again. Erica and I had prepared a final master file labeled Truth. It contained every contract, every document showing PulseLine's funding trail, the proprietary codes, the proof of attempted theft, the emails between Tasha and Ethan, even the metadata from Aaron's USB stick that linked directly to our internal system. At the top of the folder sat a scanned copy of the clause Aaron had signed when we bought the penthouse. The clause that stated in no uncertain terms that he held no legal right to sell, transfer, or inhabit the property without my written consent. Erica sent the file to the Federal Cybersecurity Division and followed it up with a message to the VitalScope board. Attached were clips from the hidden camera audio transcripts and real-time access logs showing Aaron breaching our systems. We didn't send threats. We sent evidence, and we let it speak louder than any accusation. Minutes later, the feed from the penthouse shifted. Ethan's phone buzzed. He stared at the screen, face draining. What the hell is this? He snapped. Who sent this? Aaron looked confused. What is it? Ethan turned to him. Did you access her servers again? Aaron shrugged. I used her login. It worked. I just wanted to Ethan cut him off. You idiot. This is a trap. This whole system is fake. It's a setup. We're compromised. Tasha's face twisted as her phone lit up too. A string of messages from social media, notifications from blogs. A leak had begun. Mia had timed it perfectly. The Instagram clips, the screenshots, the whispers of corporate espionage enough to stir public attention without revealing the full legal firestorm that was still coming. Ethan grabbed his coat. We need to go. Now. Just then, flashing lights lit up the windows. Police. Federal agents. I watched as they burst through the front door. Tasha screamed. Aaron stood frozen. Ethan raised his hands slowly. The feed cut out. I stared at the dark screen, my hand still resting on Max's back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. And I whispered, You took everything you thought I had, but you never saw what I was building behind you. You saw a mother, a wife, a distraction. You forgot I was the architect. The next morning, PulseLine's board met in emergency session. I presented the truth calmly with receipts. Not only did they vote to increase security funding, they authorized a press statement clearing our name and condemning all unethical actions taken against us. Our valuation soared within days. The investor community rallied behind our integrity. But more than that, I reclaimed my space, my company, my future, and my son's. Aaron never saw it coming, because he never saw me. Not really. And now he never would again. 2 weeks later, the penthouse was quiet again, returned to my name by court order. The stolen funds were frozen across multiple offshore accounts thanks to swift intervention by federal investigators who took one look at the evidence and acted decisively. Aaron's face had been splashed across industry blogs and business headlines not as a visionary strategist, but as a cautionary tale in betrayal and overconfidence. VitalScope's board, desperate to distance itself, released a public statement denouncing all actions and terminating Aaron's contract effective immediately. Ethan Ford resigned 2 days later under pressure from shareholders. Tasha disappeared from social media. Her influencer career collapsed as quickly as it had been built. The final blow came quietly. The Department of Justice issued formal charges against Aaron for wire fraud, intellectual property theft, and unauthorized access to secure systems. His trial was scheduled for the fall, but his professional life was already over. He was barred from working in any financial or healthcare-related field. When Erica and I sat down to review the damage, she looked at me and said something I would always remember. "You didn't just survive this, Rachel. You redefined what it means to fight back." She was right, but I didn't do it for the victory. I did it for clarity, for peace, for Max. Pulseline. Not only recovered, it surged. Our diagnostic AI was fast-tracked into clinical trials with 3 major health networks. Investor confidence rose and new capital flooded in. I made the decision to expand cautiously, reinvesting not just in tech, but in people. Fair salaries, mental health resources, a leadership program for young female engineers. I knew what it felt like to be underestimated. I wanted to ensure no one in my company ever felt that way. I took a walk through the new downtown headquarters on launch day. The walls were lined with art from local women artists, the air humming with quiet determination. I paused by a framed quote in the lobby chosen by Mia. It read, "Some storms come to clear a path." I smiled. I knew which storm that was. I returned to the penthouse one weekend with Max. We opened the balcony doors and let the sea air rush through. He ran along the living room shouting about being a pirate. I let him. That place once tainted by betrayal was now ours again, reclaimed, purified. On the bookshelf sat a silver frame. Inside was a printout of Aaron's original email. The one that began all of it, the photo, the cold message, the assumption that I would surrender. I kept it not out of bitterness but as a reminder of who I had been and who I had become. Max curled up next to me that night on the couch watching cartoons, and I realized something deeper than relief. I had not just won. I had transformed. I had rebuilt my life on truth, on resilience, on the bones of every insult and every assumption made about me. They thought I was just a startup wife, a mother too distracted to notice. But I had always been more. I had built an empire in the shadows and defended it with fire. I held Max's hand and whispered, "No one will ever steal what's ours again." His eyes met mine and he nodded as if he understood something far beyond his years. I kissed his forehead and thought back to the girl I once was hunched over a laptop in a shared apartment, dreaming of something more. That girl had made it. Not in spite of the betrayal, because of it. Because the fire that came from losing everything lit the path to take it all back. And now I would never be underestimated again. Months passed, and with them came a new rhythm, one not built on defense, but on quiet strength. Pulseline expanded into 3 new states, and our AI platform was adopted by 2 major hospital systems as part of their remote monitoring solution. Our ethics board gained national attention for its transparency and employee-first policies. I stayed out of the spotlight as I always had, letting the work speak, letting the systems speak, letting the results echo. I was invited to speak at conferences, to take interviews, to become the face of female-led tech disruption, but I turned most of it down. Not because I was afraid, but because I was fulfilled. My voice wasn't needed in headlines. It was needed in boardrooms and development labs and bedtime stories read softly to my son. Max started preschool full-time and came home every day with paint on his clothes and joy in his eyes. He once came home holding a picture he drew of me at a computer with the word "fixer" scribbled underneath. I taped it to the wall of my home office and stared at it often. One Friday afternoon, I received a package at headquarters. No return address. Inside was a yellow envelope, and inside that was a letter written in Aaron's handwriting. The words were messy, desperate, full of apologies and attempts to explain what couldn't be justified. He asked to speak to Max, asked for forgiveness, claimed he had lost himself in ambition and fear. He ended it with a plea. Just one conversation. I didn't reply. I sent the letter to Erica not because I was afraid of him, but because I knew exactly what kind of narrative he was trying to build. A redemption arc for himself. But he wouldn't get to write that ending. Not in our story, not in Max's. I placed a final update into the Guardian folder that night, sealing it with a simple note closed. The next morning, I watched Max eat pancakes at our kitchen table, humming to himself, wearing one of my old Pulseline t-shirts as pajamas. He smiled at me, syrup on his chin, and I smiled back. There was no sign of the firestorm he had once been at the center of. Only peace, only warmth, and a quiet promise between us. I took him to the beach later that day, the very beach the penthouse overlooked, the same view Aaron once used to flaunt a future that wasn't his to claim. Max ran across the sand, chasing waves and throwing seaweed, while I sat in the sun with my laptop drafting a proposal for a new Pulseline program, one that would support single mothers in underserved communities with remote health tools and startup grants. I named it the Carter Initiative, not for Aaron, but for Max, for the future. For the legacy we would build, not out of wealth or revenge, but out of love and structure and permanence. On our walk back from the beach, Max stopped and pointed up at the sky. "Look, Mommy," he said. "That one's the strongest cloud." I nodded. "You're right, baby. Just like you." That night, as he slept beside me on the couch, the waves crashing in the distance, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. The man who tried to erase me gave me the sharpest ink to write my name in history. I closed the book and smiled. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the silence that came after the storm, the peace built on the rubble, the home built on ground, reclaimed by truth. I looked out at the stars and whispered, "We are safe now, and nothing will ever shake this again." A year later, I stood at the Pulseline Foundation Gala wearing a simple black dress, no designer label, no borrowed diamonds, just the quiet power of presence earned not through image but through war. The room was filled with donors, doctors, engineers, and advocates from across the country, many of whom had watched our company rise from a scandal to a standard. I delivered a short speech. I didn't mention Aaron. I didn't mention Vital Scope. I didn't need to. The only names I uttered were the women who inspired our new grant program, the children whose lives had been extended through early diagnosis, and the single mothers who now had access to tools that once felt like distant luxury. Afterward, people came up to shake my hand, some with tears in their eyes, thanking me for not just surviving, but transforming what happened into something lasting. But none of them knew the full story. They didn't know about the long nights spent watching security feeds in silence, the ache of holding my son, knowing his father had chosen destruction over devotion, the fury I had to shape into action or risk being consumed by it. And that was fine. They didn't need to know. All they needed to see was the result. I left the gala early and drove to the penthouse. Max was already asleep upstairs with my sister, who had come to stay for the weekend. I poured a cup of tea and sat on the balcony watching the city glow beneath the moonlight. That balcony had once been the setting of my humiliation. Now it was the seat of my restoration. In the distance, I could hear the echo of laughter from a passing boat. I smiled faintly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. Fully. Steadily. I opened my laptop and browsed through our next round of user testing data. The latest AI update was showing a 94% accuracy rate in early-stage cardiac diagnosis. That number wasn't just a statistic, it was a future. A mother spared, a child kept, a life redirected. My inbox pinged. It was a message from a young founder I had mentored. Her startup had landed funding. She wrote, "Thank you for showing me what quiet power looks like." I read it twice and whispered, "That's all I ever wanted. Power not as a weapon, but as a shield. For Max, for women like me, for girls building code at kitchen tables with a toddler on their lap." I closed the laptop and walked inside. The walls were lined with art Max had made in school, messy crayon masterpieces full of energy and sky. In the corner of my office was the framed email Aaron had once sent. It sat there untouched, a fossil of arrogance, a monument to short-sighted greed. I didn't keep it for revenge. I kept it as a testament, to remind me that the moment someone tried to break me was the moment I became more unbreakable than I had ever been. I turned out the lights and stood by Max's door watching him sleep, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with the peace we had earned. I had faced a man who believed he owned my story and reminded him I was the one holding the pen. I had stood in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in silence, and let truth do the speaking. I had fought for every dollar, every piece of paper, every second of calm. And I had won. Not because I screamed louder, but because I endured longer. That was the legacy. That was the lesson. And that was the life we had built. Max stirred and mumbled in his sleep. I walked over, brushed his hair back, and whispered, "You will always be safe with me." Outside, the wind picked up rustling the curtains, but inside, the room was still, strong, and mine, all of it. I had nothing left to fear, because I had already faced the worst and risen higher. I stepped back into the hall and closed the door quietly behind me, the sound of it clicking into place, not as an end, but as a seal on a promise. We are unshakable now, and the world will never again mistake our silence for surrender. Months later, I was invited to speak at a private summit for women in tech hosted in Aspen, a quiet gathering far from headlines where founders and funders spoke not in rehearsed sound bites, but in truths too sharp for public panels. I hadn't planned to accept, but Mia nudged me with one sentence in her email. They need to hear from the woman they never saw coming. I went. Not for recognition, but because I remembered how lonely it was building something in the dark with only instinct to guide you. In that room, I spoke without slides, without polish, just story. I told them about late nights coding with a baby monitor buzzing beside me, about boardrooms where men called my metrics lucky guesses, about how I gave someone I loved access to everything only to watch him try to burn it down. I spoke of resilience not as a buzzword, but as a strategy of silence, not as surrender, but as structure. And I told them what mattered most, that no one would hand them justice or validation or peace. They would have to build it, protect it, and reinforce it like a foundation. And when I finished, the room was silent, not with doubt, but with recognition. Afterward, one young woman approached me, maybe 24, with tired eyes and a fire that reminded me of my own years ago. She said I almost quit this year. Then I found your story. Now I know I'm not crazy. I'm just surrounded by people who want me small. I hugged her, told her small people always try to shrink what they can't build. I flew home that night and found Max asleep in my bed with a stack of his dinosaur books beside him. I curled in next to him and whispered the ending of our favorite story. The dinosaur always comes home. The next morning, I walked through Pulseline headquarters greeted by smiles, by ideas, by momentum. Raymond met me at the elevator. We just hit full integration across our third hospital network. I nodded. Let's get it to 5. Erica called later that week. Aaron had accepted a plea deal, 3 years probation, a lifetime ban from executive positions, full repayment of stolen assets. He had requested to write a formal letter to me and to Max. I declined. There were no more pages in our story that belonged to him. I didn't need closure from the man who opened a door he couldn't control. I already had everything I needed, my company, my child, my peace. That weekend, Max and I returned to the beach. He ran along the shore building sandcastles as waves lapped the edges, and I sat nearby with a notebook in hand. Not for planning, not for defense, just to write. Words that had waited patiently behind battle lines. I wrote about healing that doesn't ask for applause, about victories no one else sees, about the quiet after you rebuild and the sound of your own breath finally steady. I wrote about power that doesn't need to crush anything to prove it exists. I wrote about legacy. Then I tore the page out, folded it, and placed it inside a sealed envelope. I gave it to Mia and said, "One day when Max asks why I fight so hard, give him this. Let him know that his mother didn't just survive. She designed something better for both of us. And for anyone who needed proof that a woman underestimated can become a storm no one can predict and no one can stop." That night, Max crawled into my lap and asked if we could watch the stars. We stepped onto the balcony wrapped in blankets, and he pointed at the sky. "That one looks like a castle," he said. I smiled. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's ours." He leaned into me safe and warm, and I knew the truth. The war was over, the kingdom was intact, and the throne had never belonged to anyone else.